Welcome, Swagatam, Jai Hind. In this video, I offer a considered, somewhat detailed analysis from my standpoint of the significance of the cockroach revolution, at least the cockroach resistance that was enacted at Jantar Mandir of New Delhi. Jantar Mandir is a site very clear and fresh in my mind, because I too have participated in several protests, gatherings at Jantar Mandir, but that's beside the point. When something happens, something as significant as the protest organized by the Cockroach Janata Party, with the outcome that we are now familiar with, which I don't have to even mention, we have to go beyond the mere factual narration of the event. We also have to undertake an analysis of its historical, thematic, even spiritual significance. And that's what I hope to offer you, or propose to offer you, through this video. I request your patient participation, because I'm going to introduce various concepts. If you want to understand anything at all, you need to have a theoretical framework for it, as well as the tools of analysis required. Now, that's what I propose to provide. And at the outset itself, let me say that my thinking here is very substantially influenced by that great French political philosopher, whom I consider to be the greatest after Plato and Aristotle. His name is Alexis de Tocqueville. Alexis de Tocqueville, Tocqueville. I'm making a particular reference to his work published in 1856, titled The Old Regime and the Revolution. The Old Regime and the Revolution. So I will not go on mentioning the name of Tocqueville or the title of the book, but my ideas are largely influenced by Tocqueville's political philosophy. But I'll make it as light as I possibly can, so that even without any background in political philosophy, even a person with a fourth standard education can follow what I wish to say, what I have to say. The first thing that I want to mention from Tocqueville is his insight that, in his words, an unknown force drives history. Please note this, very interesting. An unknown force drives history. When we look at history on the prima facie, or the face of it, you will think that various individuals, known individuals, are acting, or groups are interacting, some kind of struggle, conflict, face-off, all these things are there, no question about it. But beyond all that, says Tocqueville, an unknown force drives history. Now, I find a similar idea in Hegel's philosophy of history. To some extent, I also find the same idea in Immanuel Kant's. So this is something that we must keep at the back of our mind, and I'm not going to explain this or say anything more about it. So the common idea that we find in Tocqueville, in Hegel, in Kant, is that history has its own logic. And this is very aptly and powerfully expressed, articulated by Hegel. So I can only leave you to read Hegel if you're inclined. So please remember this: history is making itself. That's what he says. History is spirit with a capital S. This is Hegel. Capital S. Spirit making itself. So Kant says, beyond the visible drama that you find on the horizontal plane, something higher than that is fulfilling its own purpose. So these are all correlated ideas, but I don't want to confuse you or burden you any further. Let me just move on. For example, very often we say, in the fullness of time, something will happen. The time is not ripe yet. What does it mean? Something other than what human agents of action are doing is also participating or doing something there. This is also very basic to the Hindu spiritual philosophy, that when everything goes wrong, there will be an intervention on the part of God, and that's the idea of the avatar. in the biblical vision, there's the intervention of the Son of Man in the fullness of time. So these are all very interesting. These are all correlated ideas. Now, for example, if Mahatma Gandhi were to live today, he would have been a failure. Paucity of time does not allow me to go into details. Or if Mahatma Gandhi were to fight against Hitler, he would have been an utter failure. So there's a correlation between Mahatma Gandhi and the spirit of the British at that time, which accommodated some degree of nobility, or sense of honor, some small degree of the sense of justice, etc., without which Mahatma Gandhi would have been eliminated in no time. So this is something that's fairly obvious. I hope I don't have to say more about it. Now, for example, the French philosophers of the 19th century believed in a concept called the man of the moment. That is to say, history produces from within itself an agent of its own healing, its own remedies. That's called and that individual does not have to be a great person like Napoleon. Maybe even an seemingly insignificant person will be picked up by this purpose, the teleology or the purposiveness of history, to serve as its agent of retribution, the agent that would restore the balance. So again, I can only mention this. We have to move on. Now, for example, I've said this in one of the previous videos. If you read Victor Hugo's great novel, Les Miserables, there is a long chapter where he discusses the French Revolution. And that chapter ends with a question: who defeated Napoleon Bonaparte? He says, not the Duke of Wellington, not the might of the English army. He says, history defeated Napoleon. Again, I don't have the time to explain more about it. I wish we had the time, but then we're living in an age of impatience. Now let's concentrate on Jantar Mantar. From now onwards, I'm going to concentrate only on what happened in Jantar Mantar. The first thing I want to say, and that's the reason why I said at the outset that Jantar Mantar is a place very dear to my heart and very, very clear in my memory. I have absolutely no hesitation in saying that the cockroaches have transformed Jantar Mantar. If I were to go back to Delhi, which I don't propose to, I'm sure that I'll feel, if not find, I'll feel Jantar Mantar as something entirely new, entirely different to what it was when I was there, say 10 years, 20 years ago. So, what is the change? The change is that the cockroach movement, I wouldn't say the Cockroach Janata Party because it's not a party. So I would call it a cockroach movement. In one of my previous videos, I expressed the wish that this movement turns itself into a political party, but that's all in the offing, if at all. So let me call it only a movement. So the cockroach movement has turned or transformed Jantar Mantar from a site or location of protest into the location of a new birth. And what is that? The birth of a new hope. Jantar Mantar is no longer a place of protest. It's a sacred site, a sacred location where a new hope has been born. Therefore, let me give it a name. In Urdu, the word for hope is Ummeed. Ummeed Jagana. So let me call Jantar Mantar Ummeed Janma Bhumi, the birthplace of hope, India's real Ayodhya. So the cockroach movement has transformed Jantar Mantar, which till then, or till recently, has been the location, the designated location of protest, into the birthplace of a new hope, Ummeed Janma Bhumi. That's a name I would like to give it. All right? Now, the cockroach movement has a resurrected hope against despair. I don't have to say that there is a background of despair without which 21 young people, very promising young people, would not have committed suicide. Suicide is the absolute and ultimate expression of hopelessness. That is universally agreed upon. I don't have to argue this. So that is a background against which this people's movement gathered momentum. Now, in the universal spiritual vision, you find it in all religions, since BJP claims to be a religious political outfit. Let's talk about the heart of religion, which is spirituality. If you look at the spiritual vision of every religion, you will find that there is a recognition there that human life is established on three cornerstones. They are faith, hope, and love. If you don't have faith in the various aspects of life, in the various facets of organizing life, various instrumentalities, systems, institutions, the state, etc., etc. If you don't have faith in each other, life will come to a grinding halt. So faith is very important. And what happens when, after democracy is a political structure of faith, people repose their faith in their leaders. And the leaders consistently betray the faith that people repose in them. The very foundation of democracy is weakened, and one day it will collapse. So faith is important. Hope. People must have hope. Whereas dictatorships thrive by undermining hope and spreading an ambience of hopelessness, because hopelessness enfeebles and paralyzes individuals, and it rules out resistance. If you have to put up any resistance, either as an individual or as a group of organized people, you must have hope. Hopelessness reduces people to utter helplessness and paralysis. Love. You must love a cause. You must love one another. You must love certain ideas, certain moral values. You must love life itself. When 21 young people commit suicide one after the other, they are also expressing a very serious disease, that a pandemic, an epidemic that is spreading in our midst. That is, we are beginning to lose our love for life. It's a very serious issue. I don't have the time to explain that in detail. So remember three words: faith, hope, love. All of these, in the opinion of the young people, and I've been examining the various statements that they have made, all these fundamental corners of life have been eroded, and therefore their attempt was to restore life to these foundational values, the cornerstones of life. I repeat, faith, hope, and love. All three of which had been weakened in their opinion of late. So they have reaffirmed and celebrated these cornerstones of life at Jantar Mandir, and they have proved that faith, hope, and love are stronger than the might of the state. The government, the state, through its instrumentalities of force, might, brute force, against faith, hope, and love. And faith, hope, and love have proved themselves to be stronger than the water cannons, the batons, the lathis, the bullets, the rubber bullets of the state. So let me put it this way, and I have noted it as such. I'm going to read a sentence I wrote. The young people have reclaimed the right to have faith in themselves, the right to have hope in their future and hope for their future, and the right to love one another beyond labels of division. Of late, especially in the last 12 years, India has been divided according to various labels. And that's what politics of hatred does. And this hatred is the foremost falsehood or lie. So post-truth politics is politics of untruth. And the quintessence of that untruth is hate. Without hate, you cannot create post-truth politics. Therefore, you must see the cockroach revolution against this much wider backdrop of a very creative protest against all that erodes the foundational strength of democracy and a healthy way of life, namely faith, hope, and love, the freedom to love one another. The next point I want to make is this. We must regard the symbolic significance of suicide. After all, suicide was the triggering point, the heart of the movement, the wellspring of the life of the Cockroach revolution, ironically, is suicide. Suicide of the young. Very important. It's a very powerful metaphor. The young committing suicide. In this country, we are used to farmers committing suicide, but that happens as a distance. It is confined to a certain section of the society, a society to which not much value, unfortunately, is associated, and therefore, farmers have been dying in this country in their thousands, tens and thousands, but nobody really minded it. But when young people, promising young lives, are snuffed out, and they are reduced to a desperation in which they think that they have nothing to do except the only way to help themselves is to end their life by committing suicide, then it becomes a very powerful metaphor. Unfortunately, the government chose to be blind to the power of this metaphor. And that's where the mistake began. So, suicide, the power of suicide, is that it is an unambiguous statement of the hopelessness, utter crushing hopelessness that besieges young people. When the society and its systems or institutions fail individuals completely, individuals feel that they are sunk deep into despair and hopelessness, and the only way out of it that they can think of is committing suicide. And that's the pathos of this instance. Now, it is very appropriate to mention here that yesterday the Kargil commemoration day was observed. A great tributes were paid to the martyrs of Kargil, etc. But nobody really mentioned the fact that among the 12 young people who committed suicide, one of the girls was the daughter of a Kargil soldier, a Kargil veteran. He lives in Dehradun. So please investigate that. So this show of great gratitude to the martyrs of Kargil is one thing, and the real life reality of the daughter of a Kargil veteran being driven to suicide is the other side of the reality, which we cannot and should not overlook. Now here, let me request you to listen to Alexis de Tocqueville. Tocqueville says that despair or hopelessness is the foremost symptom of despotism. Despotism can establish and tighten its stranglehold on the people only by making them individually feel utterly helpless. So it pits the individual against the state, and we know that is an utterly unequal equation. And that's what is happening through all the various things that have happened. Indian society is being atomized, so the individual versus the state. And there the individual feels understandably utterly helpless, hopeless, miserable. So all despots, this is not my view. According to Tocqueville, and again let me give you the reference, the title of the book is The Old Regime and the Revolution. In that book, Tocqueville says, all despots are keen to anatomize the society, that is, chop up the society into the smallest possible unit, which is the individual. All despots are keen to anatomize the society as well as ruin or despoil the traditional modes of organization. Every despot will violently react against people organizing themselves in any form whatsoever, and will try his level best and throw all his might into nipping in the bud people's attempt to organize themselves. So despotism, according to Alexis de Tocqueville, works by intensifying the insignificance, hopelessness, and despair of individuals. Hence, the intolerance on the part of all despots in history, I'm not talking about India, I'm talking about history as a whole, intolerance to, after all, Alexis Tocqueville lived long before 2014, so no one can say that Tocqueville is criticizing Modi. So it's safe for me to derive ideas from Tocqueville, and that's the main reason why I'm doing so. My attempt here is not to say anything against the X, Y, or Z. My attempt is to present to the people of India food for thought. I know that that's a very dangerous vocation, but I have to do it because I've been a teacher. I still am a teacher. I want to die a teacher. So he says, all despots prioritize the need to spread helplessness and hopelessness among individuals. They also will react violently against any attempt on the part of the people to organize themselves into groups, because groups can resist more effectively than isolated individuals. Now here, of course, let me just step out of Tocqueville and take you to Hitler. I hope you have read Hitler's autobiography called Mein Kampf. Mein, M-E-I-N, Kampf, K-A-M-P-F. Mein Kampf. Very, very fascinating reading. Why do you think Hitler went after the Jews? If you read Hitler's autobiography, you will find that in the early stages of his life, Hitler had great admiration for the Jews. Still, he went after them. Why? Because the Jews were the most coherent, persistent, enduring organization, mode of organization. And therefore, it went against the logic of despotism to have the Jews survive who had a great sense of tradition, who were fiercely committed to perpetuating that tradition. Therefore, they will not be easily co-opted into the agenda of Hitler. That's the reason why. That's also the reason why Hitler hated, like all fascist governments, Hitler hated with equal force left movement, the Marxists, for example. Then after that, trade unionists. Thereafter, the Catholic Church. And finally, the Protestant Church. That's why, one after the other, everybody was finished off. So that when individuals are left alone, their utter helplessness in the face of the might of the state becomes tragically complete. So, the 21 individuals in our context, the present context, who committed suicide, perished as lonely, abandoned individuals who had no reason for hope. Otherwise, they wouldn't have taken this extreme step. They became the symbols of the plight of the youth of India today, which is the reason why the youth all over the country began to resonate with the plight of this unfortunate 21 young people who had to choose the path of suicide to end their misery and their despair. Now, let's move on. The cockroach antidote to this state of despair, the cockroach antidote to this state of despair is the rallying of the youth, enabling them to break out of all barriers and enclaves, isolated enclaves. Individuals exist either as isolated individuals or as isolated pockets of individuals harboring grievances of every kind without being able to do anything to ameliorate their condition. The cockroach movement addressed this state and provided a rallying point for the youth of India. And therefore, what has been enacted at Jantar Mantar, which I now call the Ummid Janma Bhoomi, is a sacrament of unity. Youth unity, but not just youth unity. If you watch the crowd carefully, which I have done, you will find that people of all age groups came there, some even in their 70s. Men, women, young and old, people cutting across all barriers of caste, creed, color, etc. One of the most striking scenes, which I shall cherish for the rest of my mind, is that of a Muslim young man serving in the protest site by simply providing food free of cost to people. He came from Rajasthan. And a Hindu lady comes all the way from Uttar Pradesh just to embrace him. And she weeps on his shoulders, thanking him for the soulful service he is rendering. That is the power of unity. It is this power that tyrants and despots fear most. That's why they spread hatred. Hatred is a foremost instrument for dividing and atomizing a society into helpless, insignificant individuals. So we must now remember Jantar Mantar not as a protest site, but as a sacred place where human unity has been celebrated in such a moving, heartwarming, touching manner, unforgettable manner. So, the BJP, the Sangh Parivar as a whole also wants to promote unity, but it's only the unity of Hindus. And therefore, that unity can be established only on the foundation of hatred, of alienation. But what the cockroach movement has inaugurated is a new foundation for unity, which is other than hatred, the foundation of a sense of belonging together, based, as I said earlier, based on faith, hope, and love. And the significance of this, I cannot exaggerate. I cannot even adequately explain. So, the idea of Hindu unity, the plight of the Hindu lower caste is a very huge problem, but that's a problem that cannot be discussed, because the moment I discuss it, people will say that I'm trying to be an anarchist, I'm trying to bring conflict among the Hindu community. Again, I don't think it has to be discussed because it's in everybody's knowledge, so I just gloss over it. So at the protest site, if you have watched carefully, you would have seen various expressions of human unity. For example, various art forms were used. The function of art is to enable individuals to transcend the various labels of division that human beings, out of their vested interest, create and slap on people. If you go and sit in a cinema hall and watch a good film, you will not think that the man is sitting, a woman sitting next to him is a Hindu, Muslim, Christian, or whatever, or a Marxist, or a BJP person, or a Samajwadi party, or whatever. No, you're fellow human beings. That's the function of art. So you found various art forms in free play and full use at the protest site. That itself is a very, very refreshing thing. You also saw various pageants being used. For example, a young girl came dressed up as a bride. So when the media people asked her, and she was beautiful, stunningly beautiful, she would catch anybody's eye. So the media people naturally flocked to her and asked the question as to why she came up dressed as a bride to a protest site. She said that India today leaves me with no hope of getting properly educated and therefore getting also employed. And therefore, the only thing I can think of in order to ensure my survival is getting married and becoming a housewife. I can't be employed anywhere else. I can only be employed as a housewife. And that's a very beautiful artistic form of way of articulating or expressing the hopelessness that is gripping the young people of India. I also saw, for example, gender equality being beautifully enacted. The focus was, for the most part, on young men, beginning with Abhijit Dipke. But more than anybody else, the person who attracted me most is a young girl called Neha Bora. She's a JNU student, a PhD student. Neha, N-E-H-A. You must look her up. She's the president of AISA, A-I-S-A, the CPI students movement. AISA, A-I-S-A. Ah, she's such a promise. She's such a promise. I would walk 1,000 miles just to say thank you to her. I mean, she impresses me that much. Now, let's move to the next point. What the cockroach movement has celebrated, affirmed beyond any shadow of doubt, is the power of purity in politics. I wish I could express that idea adequately. The power of purity in politics. We are used to thinking of politics as the domain entirely reserved for the corrupt, the venal, the unconscionable, the lumpen. No. The young people of this country have something extremely important and very refreshing to say. They have said in one voice, they have spoken in one voice. Politics must be a domain of purity, because if the purity of politics is compromised, the country as a whole will become victims. Every citizen will become a victim. Young, old, Hindu, Muslim, everyone will become a victim. I'm going to now say something which is very controversial. I know it's controversial, but it needs to be said. In my opinion, the opposition parties have lost more than the government itself through the cockroach movement. Why? Because the cockroach movement has proved to the country as a whole how incompetent, ineffectual the opposition parties are, including the so-called India alliance. See, a spontaneous association of young people without any organizational clout, without any money power, without any great ideological firepower, they have made such a huge difference in this country. All these opposition parties, which together actually constitute a majority, they represent the majority in this country. They represent over 60% of India's population. Why are they so helpless, so ineffective? So the great, tremendous, dramatic, historic success of the cockroach movement is an implicit criticism, in fact, an indictment of the opposition parties, because they don't know what is to be done. They don't know who they are. They don't know what their democratic duties are. They are only there to protect their seat. It's not the way to function in a critical moment like this. I can only hope and pray that the opposition parties learn their lesson from this very significant historical movement. If they don't, they'll fall into the dustbin of history. So, there are two reasons why the opposition parties are proving themselves to be very unequal to the task of serving as an effective and meaningful or remedial opposition in the India of today. One, their track record of corruption and inefficiency. Let's not mince words. Every party that are in the opposition today has misused the office one way or another, including the Congress. There's no point in denying the truth. So the more your past corruptions will make you very feeble today. And that's the whole idea of whataboutery. When the Congress or any opposition party comes up and says something, BJP can silence them in 1 second by saying, but what about you? Didn't you do it? And that the matter ends. Whataboutery. Why is whataboutery such as an atom bomb in the Indian politics? Because of the track record of the opposition parties. The second point of weakness of the opposition parties in India, the opposition alliance in India, if there's an alliance at all, is the absence of a point of unity and coherence. There has to be some ideological coherence. They must have a shared purpose. If you have a conglomeration of opposition parties, each party interested only in protecting its own seat, how can there be unity? So, I hope Rahul Gandhi is listening. He is the leader of the opposition. His primary task must be to discover a point of coherence for opposition unity and to adjust his own party accordingly, so that from a position of moral authority, he can talk to the other parties and say, come, let us together decide what is the main agenda we should be following, like the cockroach movement has shown. They have not been able to do that as yet. As a result, the opposition India alliance is weaker today than it was 2 years ago. And this is something that the people of India feel very hurt about. And that's the reason why when these opposition parties come up and perform a song and dance in public, people don't take them seriously. And tragically, they still don't ask the question why it is that the people of India are not resonating with us. It's not that they don't resonate. The cockroach movement should end that uncertainty once and for all. The people of India are ready and eager to resonate with anybody who has some credibility. The opposition parties have to establish the plank of their credibility, and they're doing nothing about it. And therefore, I dare say that the people or the forces in this country that have lost most through the cockroach movement is the opposition alliance. So, unlike the opposition parties, the protagonists of the cockroach movement are not saddled with a dirty old baggage of the past. Mind you, it was not the size and spread of the crowd that came together in Jantar Mantar or in other parts of India, other cities of India, that constituted the strength of the cockroach movement. It was the power of their purity, the fact that the government could not attack them in any way. Various attempts were made. They were called anti-nationals. They were alleged to have received funding from Pakistan, from America, from George Soros, whatever. They were called anti-nationals. They were called anarchists. And somebody called Arnav Goswami is now going hammer and tongue after it. To him, there's only one anarchist movement in the entire world, and that is the cockroach movement. So it's not the size and spread of the crowd, but the substance of the youth that scared Modi, Amit Shah, and company. So, given the fact that the protagonists of the cockroach movement have no track record of corruption, venality, or malfeasance in public life, the dreaded instruments of ED, IT, CBI, etc., totally powerless in relation to Abhijit Deepke and his associates. There's nothing that can be done to them. There's no way they can be intimidated. That is the reason. That's what the opposition parties need to learn. So, the incomparable asset, the incomparable political asset is fearlessness. Look at Gandhi. What was Gandhi's strength? It was fearlessness. But where does fearlessness come from? It comes from truth. Truth. Mind you, that one word is worth repeating 1,000 times because we have forgotten that word. Truth. Truth. The power of truth. At least from this instance, I wish the opposition parties would learn the lesson that the great Mahatma has given us, the power of truth. Jesus said, truth and truth alone will set you free. You compromise truth, you will end up as slaves. You want to ruin your freedom, you want to become slaves, all you have to do is take the path of falsehood, dishonesty, corruption. And that's exactly what has happened to us. We have become an immoral society. Please remember. And a lot of hue and cry is made about the judicial system being corrupt. So the NCERT textbook of standardized, there was a chapter on the corruption of the judiciary, and the Supreme Court immediately takes suo motu action and sees to it that that chapter is extirpated. So the Supreme Court knows how to take suo motu action. It's all right if there is corruption in the judiciary, but you shouldn't say that there is corruption in the judiciary, because nobody wants to give up corruption. What is the lure of power if you don't have the opportunity and the freedom to practice corruption? But as far as the citizens are concerned, corruption is the cyanide, potassium cyanide to their freedom. Please understand. So, what the Mahatma has taught us is the power of purity. And the power of purity is truth. And truth is freedom. This is exactly the quintessence of the Gandhian political vision. You don't have to read great tomes about it. You want to understand Gandhi's political vision? I can tell you in 3 words. Purity, truth, freedom. Purity, truth, freedom. Nothing more is required. All 3 of which the Congress has forgotten, all opposition parties have forgotten, and I don't have to say anything about BJP and its associates. So all despots, according to Tocqueville, I've said at the outset, and I remind you again that all that I'm saying is based on Tocqueville's idea, Tocqueville's understanding of the political equations, political concepts, realities, etc. So, according to Tocqueville, all despots use corruption to co-opt collaborators. Now, for example, in this country, we have a beautiful expression called washing machine politics. The most corrupt from any party can enter BJP and immediately get washed completely clean of all their track record in corruption. So corruption becomes a foremost qualification for somebody to be inducted into the BJP, and at the same time the BJP can say, and the Modi would say, I will never tolerate corruption. And the people of this country, intellectuals of this country, simply look the other way. No, my dear friends, corruption is one of the most powerful weapons that every despot in history has used. No person or party that prefers the corrupt can have any good intention. Take Ajit Pawar, the late Ajit Pawar. None other than Prime Minister Modi and the present Home Minister Amit Shah accused him of embezzling money to the tune of 70,000 crores. What happened to him after he formed an alliance with BJP? So please understand that those who tolerate corruption, those who consider corruption to be a very attractive eligibility, cannot tolerate the freedoms of the people. Surprisingly, the simple historic lesson or simple lesson of history is lost on India as a whole, and I am shocked. Now, a further question. Why did, and this is one of the most significant aspects of the cockroach movement, it put its emphasis heavily on accountability. Everything that the protagonists of the cockroach movement have said from start to finish is that this is a movement to bring accountability back into public life. Now you tell me whether this is a subversive agenda. Ask Arnab Goswami, he would say this is anarchist agenda. Accountability is anarchy. Accountability equals anarchy according to Arnab Goswami. And he is a conscience keeper of India. Okay? So, the protagonists of the cockroach movement made the unambiguous statement that their uncompromising goal, the foremost goal is to bring accountability back into public life. And here let me quote a sentence from Alexei de Tocqueville. He says, there is nothing that a despot dislikes and fears more than accountability. Please remember these words. These are the words of Alexei de Tocqueville. There is nothing that a despot dislikes and fears more than accountability. And I'm sure that the young people understand this, and that's the reason why they're using it as a powerful weapon against this huge mammoth structure of the state, presided over by Modi and Amit Shah. Tocqueville continues. Accountability bridles the abuse of power and minimizes the scope for arbitrariness, which is the very essence of despotism. Again, Tocqueville continues. Now, remember these words. Despotism thrives by activating the meanest sentiments of the people. The connection between corruption and despotism. Please understand. To me, this is the greatest argument that I want to present to you. There will be an inevitable connection. Nobody can avoid it. There is an inevitable connection between despotism and corruption. So if you think that institutions that are meant to look after the welfare and interest of the common man will function honestly in a context of despotism, you're completely wrong. History does not support that assumption. So again, not my words at all. He says, despotism thrives by activating the meanest sentiments of the people. This requires secrecy. Why non-accountability, non-transparency is considered the right of the state. Protection of the rights of the people requires transparency and accountability. The reason why the cockroach revolution has emphasized it with a hammer blow. So, appealing to the meanest sentiments of the people, says Tocqueville, requires secrecy and the darkness of non-accountability. The darkness of non-accountability. Everything has to be secret. You cannot understand why things are happening the way they are. You cannot understand why X is getting admission to a medical college and Y is not. No, Y is more meritorious than X. There's no accountability. There is total inscrutability. No one knows what is happening. Complete confusion. Okay? So he says, this requires secrecy and the darkness of unaccountability to enable, each word is important, to enable human cupidity, human greed, human cupidity to brave dishonor. Doesn't matter what dishonor it brings. If 10 of them are put in jail, it's no dishonor to them. They come out of it and they become gentlemen and respected members of the society, like the rapists and the Gujarat riots have done. So to enable human cupidity to brave dishonor for the sake of fraudulent gains. Beautifully put. I can't improve on this. Fraudulent gains. These gains today have become mega. The thousands of crores involved in the corruption of question paper leak is not properly evaluated. So again, as I said, these are quotations from Tocqueville's book, The Old Regime and the Revolution, published in 1856. Why accountability? We must understand it slightly better. Accountability of the establishment, if the establishment is made accountable to the people, then you create and maintain conditions essential for the welfare and freedom of the people. So if there is no accountability, the welfare of the people, the freedom of the people are both jeopardized. That's the reason. It's a serious issue. So, unfortunately, we don't hear the opposition parties talk about the threat to democracy due to non-accountability. Why is it the cockroach movement had to take it up? After all, this problem of non-accountability, non-transparency, etc., did not start the other day. It's been there for a long time. Because, as I said a while ago, these opposition parties do not have the moral courage, the moral substance in them to take an uncompromising stand that Gandhiji would have, because they are also compromised. They too have their hand in the till. And that is where these parties now need to sit up, take a stock of the realities, and if they are to avoid utter collapse and failure in the most crucial period of India's evolution as a nation, they have to understand these realities. The greatest power, the greatest treasure they can have is the power of integrity, upright governance, good governance. But BJP can talk about good governance and compromise the welfare of the people, the very foundations of our democracy, and then, of course, present itself also as the Vishwaguru to the rest of the world, with what consequences we have all seen. It is here that we must understand the significance of the Godi media, because what is the traditional function of journalism? Everybody knows that the duty, the sacred duty cast upon our journalists, people in the media field, the press people, is to hold the government to account, to speak power to the speak truth to the centers of power. Now, what they do is they speak power to the people. They speak on behalf of power to the people and tell them why they should be docile. So, the significance of the Godi media, or the captured or co-opted pimpish press in this country, must also be understood. The young people have understood it, as is very clearly evident from the massive hostility. I don't approve of it, but massive, evident hostility that was witnessed at the protest site in Jantar Mandir whenever members of this Godi media dare to go there. And now, of course, they are sitting and crying, why is it that the people's movement are attacking us? Because you had become the enemy of the people, as simple as that. After all, people cannot be cheated forever. They know what's happening to them. They know what you are doing to them. They know your agenda. They've seen through you. And they hold you in utter contempt. Do you think they will spread a red carpet before you? In their eyes, you have become the most despicable part of Indian democracy. So therefore, there is something to be learned. So what happens when transparency and accountability are abolished? Individuals feel utterly helpless, and it leaves them with only one hope, one option, and that is to commit suicide. At this point, we must also consider the significance of the right to associate and protest, which is again now under serious stress. The moment you come together, you have to protest according to the whims of the state. The state will decide where to protest, when to protest, whether you can protest at all. If you protest, whether you are allowed to eat food, drink water, because you've seen that every attempt was made to prevent food from being brought into the protest site by Delhi police. Inhuman. Water, and given the temperature of Delhi. So it was an assault, an organized, public, naked assault on the right of the people to associate and the right to protest, which is a constitutionally guaranteed fundamental right. But who cares for the Constitution? So the irony of the cockroach movement is that it is also the product of this loss of freedom of association. And it's from out of the heart of this darkness that this light broke out and asserted the right of the people to associate and to protest. So when democratic institutions fail, the people are left with only one option. And that option is what you see enacted at Jantar Mantar. And that's the option for the people to organize themselves and to resist. All political parties, opposition parties, have proved themselves unequal to the task. Therefore, the people don't look up to them. Therefore, the only option left to the people is to organize themselves and to put up such resistance as they can. And the pioneer in this particular aspect, as we have to mention here, is the protest by the farmers' resistance, which also had some degree of success. So, every attempt was made to discredit the cockroach movement as a movement of anarchy. Attempt was made to even the aspirations of the young people was discredited by the Chief Justice of India by calling them cockroaches, which is the origin of this entire movement. So you can understand. I don't have to argue this ad nauseum. Abhijit Jipke was labeled a threat to the country by the External Affairs Ministry, which is what actually provoked him to come back. Otherwise, he wouldn't have come back to this country. He was doing his higher studies in the Boston University, United States. And as he explicitly stated in the course of an interview, said, when I was labeled a threat to India, an anti-national element by the government itself, I had to come back. So it's not only the statement by the Chief Justice of India, but also the action by the External Affairs Ministry that contributed to the formation. That's the greatest irony of in India's history at the present time. It is this that actually compelled the formation of the cockroach movement. And now that will be further consolidated by a gentleman called Arnab Goswami and the likes of him. But they are now working overtime to discredit the cockroach movement as an anarchist, anti-national movement, which must be crushed, etc., etc. So, let me go back to where I started. The cockroach movement formed itself as a sign of hope and a ritual of celebrating that hope for the people of India. And that is the reason why people from all over the country, various nooks and corners of this country, from all walks of life, all religions, all languages, so they all resonated. And they also included those who are members of the RSS and the BJP to rally around and reveal and affirm their solidarity with the movement. Now that's a very significant thing. So it is to be noted, if you look at the list of the 21 young people who committed suicide, from a casual glance of it, it seems to me that every victim in that list of 21 is a Hindu. So ultimately, like what happened in Germany, the real victims of the degeneration of democracy will be not only Muslims and Christians, etc., or Dalits. The foremost victims will be Hindus themselves. That's a reality. And that's a reality which only this movement has brought to light. Think about it. What I've given so far, it's already 54 minutes after conclude, is my analysis particularly based on Tocqueville's political philosophy of the significance of the cockroach movement. And I hope that this beginning, which is well made indeed, does not prove a flash in the pan, and that it continues to fulfill the historical imperative which is cast upon it, which is to serve as a sentinel of the health and wholeness of Indian democracy. Jai Hind. Vande Mataram.